Just imagine, the people of Israel, thousands of men, women and children, all exhausted after days of desperate flight, babies crying in the arms of distressed mothers, elderly people staggering, barely able to take another step, entire families carrying only what they could hurriedly carry. And now everyone is trapped between the deep, unforgiving waters of the Red Sea ahead and the most powerful and well-equipped army of the time advancing rapidly behind them. Can you feel the panic rising? Desperation taking over. It's literally a no-win situation. What if at that critical moment, that decisive instant, when Moses, trembling but obedient, raised his staff toward the turbulent waters, simply nothing happened? If instead of the waters miraculously opening, they remained there indifferent, impenetrable, an insurmountable liquid wall? Have you ever stopped to think, really think, about what would have happened if the Red Sea hadn't opened? It is frightening to realize how the entire history of humanity, not just biblical history, would be completely rewritten in that one moment. Christianity as we know it today, maybe it never existed. Think about it. Without this miracle, the journey of liberation would be stopped right then and there. Judaism, possibly exterminated before it was even consolidated as a religion. The great Western civilizations shaped by these values and principles, completely unrecognizable. Would you be watching this video right now? Would your own faith, your beliefs, your spiritual connection exist as you know it? Your life would be radically different. This was, without any doubt, one of the most decisive moments in the entire Bible, a single instant that determined not only the destiny of a newborn nation, but the spiritual future of billions of people over the millennia that would follow. A moment when the impossible needed to happen. There was no plan B. Think of the sacred books that would never have been written, the prophecies that would never have been spoken, the 10 Commandments that would never have been delivered to Moses on Mount Sinai. Think of the temple that would never have been built, the Psalms that would never have been composed, and even the coming of Jesus itself. All of this, absolutely everything, could simply have been lost in the scorching sands of Egypt if those waters had not parted that day. We are talking about an event so monumentally powerful that its absence would create a domino effect, capable of completely altering not only the religious, but also the cultural, political and social landscape of the world in which we live today. It's impressive, isn't it? And there's more. That sublime moment revealed the fundamental difference between having unshakable faith or succumbing to the despair of the obvious. Moses could have given up right then and there. He could have doubted the voice he heard. He could have rationalized and concluded that it was impossible. He could have failed. The most important test of his life. How many times have you felt exactly like those Israelites, with problems as gigantic as an impassable sea in front of you and relentless armies chasing you from behind? No way out in sight, no apparent hope. What happens when you simply don't see any possibility of escape in your life? That's why this story resonates so deeply with each of us, because whether we like it or not, we've all faced our own seas of red at some point, seemingly impossible. Situations that require nothing less than a divine miracle to overcome. And most impressively, you may be facing your own Red Sea right now. Maybe that's why you felt compelled to click on this video today. It was no coincidence. It's as if something greater is preparing you to understand the transformative power that exists when we trust beyond what our eyes can see. In this video, I will take you on a fascinating and eye-opening journey through one of the biggest what-ifs in biblical and human history. Let's explore together the deep, complex, and impactful ramifications of a single moment that could have changed everything, absolutely everything we know today. And have no doubt, some of these revelations will surprise you. Prepare to question everything you thought you knew about this extraordinary miracle. Get ready to discover how something that happened thousands of years ago still directly influences your life, your choices, and your faith today, at this very moment. And believe me when I say, what you'll discover in the next few minutes could completely transform your perspective on miracles, on unshakable faith, and on divine intervention in the most desperate times. So, take a deep breath and imagine yourself there, on that beach with the roar of the waters in front and the terrifying sound of carriages and horses approaching behind. What would you do? What would you believe? And what would happen to the world if, at that crucial moment, the waters did not obey the divine command? This message has the power to transform your perspective on the impossible challenges you face today. By clicking like now, you multiply this impact, bringing hope to thousands of people who are also facing their own Red Seas right now. Your like is more than a click. It's a declaration that you believe in the power of miracles. Your story of faith is unique and powerful. Every impossible situation you have ever faced brings wisdom that can light the path for many. Share in the comments. What was the biggest Red Sea that God has ever opened in your life? Your testimony will now become a source of strength for someone who needs to believe in the impossible. You are already part of this community that seeks to deeply understand biblical truths and their impacts on our lives. Sign up now and activate the bell to strengthen this mission of revealing how biblical history shaped everything we know today. Your presence is essential on this journey of discovery. Let's find out together, and I guarantee that after this video you will never see this story the same way again. Just imagine, the people of Israel, thousands of men, women, and children, all exhausted after days of desperate flight. Babies crying in the arms of distressed mothers. Elderly people staggering, barely able to take another step. Entire families carrying only what they could hurriedly carry. And now everyone is trapped between the deep, unforgiving waters of the Red Sea ahead and the most powerful and well-equipped army of the time advancing rapidly behind them. Can you feel the panic rising? Desperation taking over? It's literally a no-win situation. What if at that critical moment, that decisive instant, when Moses, trembling but obedient, raised his staff toward the turbulent waters, simply nothing happened? If instead of the waters miraculously opening, they remained there, indifferent, impenetrable, an insurmountable liquid wall? Have you ever stopped to really think about what would have happened if the Red Sea hadn't opened? It is frightening to realize how the entire history of humanity, not just biblical history, would be completely rewritten in that one moment. Christianity as we know it today, maybe it never existed. Think about it. Without this miracle, the journey of liberation would be stopped right then and there. Judaism, possibly exterminated before it even consolidated itself as a religion. The great Western civilizations shaped by these values and principles, completely unrecognizable. Would you be watching this video right now? Would your own faith, your beliefs, your spiritual connection exist as you know it? Your life would be radically different. This was, without any doubt, one of the most decisive moments in the entire Bible, a single instant that determined not only the destiny of a newborn nation, but the spiritual future of billions of people over the millennia that would follow. A moment when the impossible needed to happen. There was no plan B. Think of the sacred books that would never have been written, the prophecies that would never have been spoken, the 10 Commandments that would never have been delivered to Moses on Mount Sinai. Think of the temple that would never have been built, the Psalms that would never have been composed, and even the coming of Jesus itself. All of this, absolutely everything, could simply have been lost in the scorching sands of Egypt if those waters had not parted that day. We are talking about an event so monumentally powerful that its absence would create a domino effect capable of completely altering not only the religious, but also the cultural, political, and social landscape of the world in which we live today. It's impressive, isn't it? And there's more. That sublime moment revealed the fundamental difference between having unshakable faith or succumbing to the despair of the obvious. Moses could have given up right then and there. He could have doubted the voice he heard. He could have rationalized and concluded that it was impossible. He could have failed the most important test of his life. How many times have you felt exactly like those Israelites? With problems as gigantic as an impassable sea in front of you and relentless armies chasing you from behind? No way out in sight, no apparent hope. What happens when you simply don't see any possibility of escape in your life? This is why this story resonates so deeply with each of us, because whether we like it or not, we have all faced our own seas of red at some point in seemingly impossible situations that require nothing less than a divine miracle to overcome. And most impressively, you may be facing your own Red Sea right now. Maybe that's why you felt compelled to click on this video today. It was no coincidence. It's as if something greater is preparing you to understand the transformative power that exists when we trust beyond what our eyes can see. In this video, I will take you on a fascinating and eye-opening journey through one of the biggest what-ifs in biblical and human history. Let's explore together the deep, complex, and impactful ramifications of a single moment that could have changed absolutely everything we know today. And have no doubt, Some of these revelations will surprise you. Prepare to question everything you thought you knew about this extraordinary miracle. Get ready to discover how something that happened thousands of years ago still directly influences your life, your choices, and your faith today at this very moment. And believe me when I say, what you'll discover in the next few minutes could completely transform your perspective on miracles, on unshakable faith, and on divine intervention in the most desperate times. So take a deep breath and imagine yourself there, on that beach, with the roar of the waters in front and the terrifying sound of carriages and horses approaching behind. What would you do? What would you believe? And what would happen to the world if at that crucial moment the waters did not obey the divine command? This message has the power to transform your perspective on the impossible challenges you face today. By clicking like now, you multiply this impact, bringing hope to thousands of people who are also facing their own Red Seas right now. Your like is more than a click. It's a declaration that you believe in the power of miracles. Your story of faith is unique and powerful. Every impossible situation you have ever faced brings wisdom that can light the path for many. Share in the comments. What was the biggest Red Sea that God has ever opened in your life? Your testimony will now become a source of strength for someone who needs to believe in the impossible. You are already part of this community that seeks to deeply understand biblical truths and their impacts on our lives. Sign up now and activate the bell to strengthen this mission of revealing how biblical history shaped everything we know today. Your presence is essential on this journey of discovery. Let's find out together, and I guarantee that after this video, you will never see this story the same way again. The power of this miraculous crossing goes far beyond what many imagine. When Moses stretched out that staff over the waters, it wasn't just a path that opened, it was the eternal destiny of humanity that changed course. Think about what that really means. A simple gesture of obedience and faith changed the spiritual trajectory of the entire planet Earth. The crossing of the Red Sea was not just another miracle among many in the Bible. It was the defining moment that demonstrated to the world that the God of Israel was not like the other Egyptian gods, made of stone and wood, incapable of action. This was a living God, a God of action, a God who intervenes in human history when everything seems lost. Those separated waters created an eternal testimony that would echo for millennia. Just imagine, if the waters had remained still, Pharaoh's army would have reached the Israelites in a matter of minutes. The massacre would be inevitable. Children, women, elderly people would all be captured or killed. The dream of the promised land would be buried right there in the sands of that beach. And what would happen to all the prophecies about the coming of the Messiah? How could they be fulfilled if the chosen people had been destroyed? Jesus would be born into what lineage if David's descendants had never existed? It is fascinating to see how everything is interconnected in this divine tapestry of history. The Israelites needed that miracle not only to survive physically, but to believe that the God who freed them from slavery in Egypt had the power to fulfill all his promises. They needed to see the impossible happen to strengthen their faith for the challenges that still lay ahead, the journey through the desert, the conquest of Canaan, the clashes with hostile people. And you, how many times have you had to see the impossible happen in your life to believe that God can fulfill what he promised? How many times have you found yourself facing a seemingly insurmountable Red Sea with no hope, no way out? It's amazing how in our journey of faith we often need these watershed moments literally to strengthen our trust in divine power. It is in these crucial moments that we discover what our faith is really made of. When Moses raised that staff, he wasn't just carrying out a divine order, he was declaring to the universe that he trusted in a power greater than any visible obstacle. He was proclaiming that he believed in miracles when everything indicated otherwise. This event not only shaped the destiny of a nation, but established a spiritual paradigm that resonates in our lives to this day. In the face of the impossible, faith opens paths where human reason sees only obstacles. Did the story of the Red Sea touch something deep in your heart right now? That feeling that God can open impossible paths even when everything seems lost? Leave the word "way" in the comments if you believe that God can open seas in your life today, even in the most impossible situations. Your comment will be a powerful testimony to all who see this video and need hope for their own seas of red. To understand the magnitude of the Red Sea miracle, we need to go back in time and understand the full context of this pivotal moment in biblical history. It All began with the brutal slavery of the Israelites in Egypt, where for over 400 years they suffered under forced labor, inhumane conditions, and systematic oppression. Generation after generation was born and died under the Egyptian yoke, with their cries rising to the heavens. It was when God raised Moses, an Israelite raised in Pharaoh's palace, to be the liberator of his people. After the 10 devastating plagues that demonstrated the power of the God of Israel over all the Egyptian gods, Pharaoh finally allowed the people to leave. But we know that this decision did not last long. With his pride wounded and mourning the loss of slave labor, Pharaoh quickly assembled his elite army, 600 chosen chariots, thousands of well-armed and trained soldiers, the most powerful military force in the ancient world. The Israelites were approximately 2 million people, including women, children, and the elderly, all walking on foot, carrying their belongings, without military training and completely vulnerable. When they reached the shores of the Red Sea and saw the dust of Egyptian chariots approaching on the horizon, panic took hold. They were literally trapped between certain death in the deep waters or violent death at the hands of Pharaoh's army. It was at this critical moment that God commanded Moses, "Lift up your staff, stretch out your hand over the sea, and divide the waters so that the Israelites may cross over on dry land." The Bible describes that a strong east wind blew all night, parting the waters and creating a path of dry land with walls of water on both sides. Imagine this extraordinary scene, millions of people crossing a path in the middle of the sea with supernaturally suspended walls of water. When the Egyptians tried to follow them, the wheels of their chariots began to come loose, creating confusion among the troops. And at the moment when the last Israelite reached safety on the other bank, Moses stretched out his hand again, and the waters returned with overwhelming force, swallowing the entire Egyptian army without leaving a single survivor. This wasn't just another miracle. This was the definitive moment that established Israel as a free nation and confirmed its covenant with God. It was the official birth of the chosen people. The crossing of the Red Sea is mentioned hundreds of times throughout the Bible as the ultimate symbol of God's power to deliver his people against all odds. That day forever transformed Israel's spiritual understanding. They saw with their own eyes that their God was not a distant and indifferent deity, but a personal God who intervenes in human history, who fights for his people and keeps his promises, even when it seems absolutely impossible. This event profoundly shaped Israel's identity and its relationship with God. Every Easter, every feast, every psalm of praise they remembered. Our God parted the sea before us. He became the quintessential paradigm of divine power, the ultimate example cited whenever people faced new impossible challenges. When you look at the impossible in your life, can you imagine a God powerful enough to divide seas in front of you? Have you ever experienced a moment when all the doors seemed closed, but suddenly a path opened up where there seemed to be no way out? Type impossible in the comments if you believe that God can still open impossible seas in your life today. Now let's explore the alternate reality that could have unfolded. On that fateful day on the shores of the Red Sea, imagine the growing tension. Thousands of Israelites crowded on the beach, listening to the ever-closer sound of horse hooves and Egyptian chariot wheels kicking up dust on the horizon. The murmur of fear spreads through the crowd like fire through dry straw. Moses, feeling the weight of responsibility on his shoulders, raises the staff as God ordered, and nothing happens. He tries again, with more strength, more faith, more desperation in his voice as he cries out to God. But the waters remain impassive, indifferent to the fate of the chosen people. Panic would set in instantly. Desperate screams of mothers clutching their children, men running in circles looking for a non-existent exit. Some might try to swim, only to be swallowed by the deep, turbulent waters. Others would fall to their knees, begging for a miracle that never came. And many would turn against Moses with bitter accusations. Was it to make us die in the desert that you brought us out of Egypt? Why did you deceive us? In a matter of minutes, the first ranks of the Egyptian army would arrive, their weapons gleaming in the sun, their faces contorted in expressions of triumph and revenge. Without any chance of effective resistance, capture would be swift and brutal. The following scenes would be of indescribable horror: families forcibly separated, children torn from their parents' arms, elderly people unable to keep pace being executed on the spot, strong, young men being chained for return to slavery. The immediate consequences would be devastating. Thousands dead on the beach, their bodies left for the vultures and waves to wash away. The survivors, exhausted and humiliated, would be forced to march back to Egypt under inhumane conditions, many dying along the way from exhaustion, dehydration, and beatings. Returning to Egypt would not just be a physical return to slavery, but something infinitely worse. Pharaoh, with his pride wounded and his authority challenged, would certainly impose conditions even more cruel than the previous ones. The Israelites would be scattered, their families deliberately separated to destroy their tribal unity. New laws could be implemented banning their religious practices, their Hebrew names, their language, a systematic attempt to erase their identity as a people. And what about faith? With Moses likely publicly executed as an example, and apparent divine abandonment when they needed it most, faith in the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob would suffer a possibly fatal blow. How can we continue to believe in a God who did not fulfill his most important promise, who left them at the mercy of their oppressors at the decisive moment? The Egyptian narrative would prevail. Their gods were superior. The God of Israel was powerless or non-existent. Without spiritual leadership, without the shared experience of miraculous deliverance, and under intensified oppression, it is possible that knowledge of the true God would have been diluted over the generations. Perhaps it survived only as legends whispered from father to son during their few hours of rest, increasingly distorted and mixed with elements of the dominant Egyptian religion. Or perhaps, as with so many ancient civilizations, it had disappeared completely. The psychological effect of this non-miracle would be profound. A people who witnessed the 10 plagues, who saw the power of God manifested again and again, would experience the deepest sense of abandonment and betrayal. This collective wound in the soul of the people would be passed down through the generations, creating a possibly irreparable spiritual scar. Think for a moment. How many times in your own life have you needed a Red Sea to part? How many impossible situations have put you between a rock and a hard place where only a miracle could save you? What if at that crucial moment the miracle hadn't happened for you? How would this have affected your faith, your identity, your destiny? Share in the comments what impact it would have had on your life if your greatest personal miracle had never happened. The religious consequences of not opening the Red Sea would be absolutely catastrophic for the spiritual history of humanity, creating a domino effect that would completely alter the religious panorama as we know it. Without the miraculous liberation of the Israelites, the first major impact would be the absence of the journey through the desert that forged the people's national and spiritual identity. The meeting on Mount Sinai, where Moses received the 10 Commandments directly from God, would never have happened, establishing the moral and ethical basis that would influence practically all Western civilizations for the next millennia. Without this pivotal event, the Israelites would never have reached the Promised Land. Canaan would never have become Israel. Think of all the biblical stories that would never have happened. Joshua and the conquest of the land, the judges who freed the people from their oppressors, Kings David and Solomon who established Jerusalem as a spiritual center. Solomon's temple, considered one of the wonders of the ancient world, would never have been built. David's psalms, which bring comfort to millions of people to this day, would never have been composed. Even more impressive, Israel's prophets, whose visions and writings not only guided the nation but also provided hundreds of messianic prophecies, would never have existed. Isaiah would never have prophesied about the suffering servant. Micah would never have pointed to Bethlehem as the birthplace of the Messiah. Daniel would never have established the prophetic chronology that announced the exact time of the Savior's coming. The absence of these prophecies would create an unimaginable spiritual vacuum. Without them, how would the world recognize the Messiah when he came? And even more crucially, without a people of Israel established in the Promised Land, the very Davidic lineage from which Jesus descended would never have existed. The divine plan for the redemption of humanity, meticulously prepared over millennia, would have been interrupted right from the beginning. The most revolutionary implication of this alternative scenario is that Christianity as we know it simply would not exist. Jesus Christ, as documented in the Gospels, came first to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. He was born a Jew, raised in Jewish traditions, attended the synagogue and temple, celebrated the Jewish festivals, constantly quoted the Hebrew scriptures, and fulfilled point by point the messianic prophecies of the Old Testament. His life, death, and resurrection were the culmination and fulfillment of all that was promised to Israel. Without Israel, without the prophecies, without the messianic expectation, without the Jewish historical and spiritual context, the coming of Jesus as we know it would have been impossible. The first Christians were all Jews who recognized in Jesus the fulfillment of promises made to their people. The apostles interpreted the life of Christ in light of the Hebrew scriptures. The first Christian communities emerged from synagogues and maintained a strong connection to their Jewish roots. And without Christianity, all of Western civilization as we know it would be unrecognizable. Think of the cathedrals never built, the universities never founded, the works of art inspired by the Christian faith that would never have been created. The values we consider fundamental to modern Western civilization, many of which derive directly from Judeo-Christian teachings, would have a completely different or perhaps non-existent basis. The very notion of universal human dignity, the idea that each person has inherent value because they are created in the image of God, a concept that underlies modern human rights, would have a completely different trajectory without the impact of Judeo-Christian thought on the world. The concept of linear historical progress with a divine purpose, which replaced the pagan cyclical view and enabled scientific development, might never have emerged. Furthermore, the Jewish communities that spread across the world over the centuries, contributing incalculably to the advancement of science, arts, philosophy, and medicine, would never have existed as we know them. Transformative figures like Einstein, Freud, Spinoza, and thousands of other revolutionary thinkers of Jewish origin might never have emerged to transform our understanding of the universe and ourselves. It is truly frightening to contemplate how a single moment, a single unfulfilled miracle, could have so drastically altered not only religious history, but the very fabric of human civilization as we know it. The non-parting of the Red Sea would have been much more than a missing miracle in the Bible. It would have meant the absence of an entire spiritual, cultural, and intellectual world that shaped who we are today. We are faced with a profound truth. The miracle of the Red Sea was not just about saving a group of runaway slaves, it was about preserving the channel through which God would bring redemption to all humanity. In a way, when those waters opened, the path to salvation for each of us was also being opened. Type redemption in the comments if you recognize that your own story of faith and salvation is directly connected to that decisive moment on the sands of the Red Sea. The impact of not opening the Red Sea would extend far beyond religious spheres, drastically altering the course of world history as we know it. We are talking about a transformation so profound that it is almost impossible to map all its ramifications. Without Christianity, the entire structure of the Western world would be unrecognizable. Think about ancient Rome. It was the conversion of the Roman Empire to Christianity that completely transformed its structure, values, and institutions. The collapse of the Western Roman Empire was followed by the medieval period, where the Catholic Church became the main unifying force in Europe. Monasteries preserved ancient knowledge, universities were founded under religious guidance, and the first charities and hospitals emerged, motivated by Christian teachings. The Renaissance, with all its artistic and intellectual explosion, was deeply informed by Christian themes and financed by religious institutions. Michelangelo, Leonardo da Vinci, Raphael all created masterpieces inspired by biblical narratives. The Protestant Reformation, one of the most transformative events in European history, would never have happened. Without it, we would not have seen the emphasis on universal literacy, so everyone could read the Bible, which drove unprecedented levels of education. The Protestant work ethic, which Max Weber identified as crucial to the development of modern capitalism, would never have emerged. The great political revolutions that shaped the modern world, the American Revolution, the French Revolution, the movements to abolish slavery, were all influenced by Christian ideals of freedom and equality. The U.S. Declaration of Independence and early constitutional documents are filled with concepts derived from Judeo-Christian thought. Even in the scientific field, Christianity played a fundamental role. Most scientific pioneers from the 16th to the 19th centuries were devout believers who saw their scientific work as a way to better understand divine creation. The very notion of an ordered universe, governed by consistent laws discoverable by the human mind, has deep roots in Judeo-Christian theology. What about Islam? This is another historic revolution that would probably never have occurred as we know it. Islam emerged in the 7th century, but drew deeply on earlier Abrahamic traditions. Muhammad considered himself in the lineage of biblical prophets, culminating and completing the revelation begun with Abraham, continued by Moses and Jesus. The Quran contains numerous references to biblical characters and stories, including Moses and the Exodus from Egypt. Without the established Jewish tradition and without Christianity already spread throughout the Middle East, North Africa and parts of Europe, Islam as we know it would simply have no basis for existing. Any religious movement that emerged in 7th century Arabia would have radically different characteristics. Without the Abrahamic references that are fundamental to Islamic identity, and without Islam, the entire subsequent history of the Middle East, North Africa, and significant parts of Asia would be completely different. We would not have seen the flowering of medieval Islamic civilization with its fundamental contributions to mathematics, astronomy, medicine, philosophy, and the arts. The transmission of classical Greek texts to Europe through Arabic translations, which contributed so much to the Renaissance, would not have happened. The absence of the three great Abrahamic religions would create an immense cultural vacuum. World literature would be devoid of its most profound influences. Western classical music, so deeply rooted in the Christian liturgical tradition, would be unrecognizable. The world's architecture would be radically different without the Gothic cathedrals, the Ottoman mosques, the ornate synagogues. Even our calendar, which counts the years from the supposed birth of Christ, would be different. Our measurement of time, the structure of our week, the holidays we celebrate all have religious roots that would be absent in this alternative world. What about the social and moral values that we consider fundamental? Concepts such as radical forgiveness, love for others, concern for the poor and marginalized all have deep roots in Judeo-Christian thought, later incorporated into Islam as well. Without these influences, our basic ethical assumptions might be surprisingly different. Think of the social institutions we take for granted: hospitals, universities, charitable organizations. Many of them initially emerged as expressions of religious values. The very notion of a civil society as distinct from the state has deep roots in Christian thinking about the limits of political power. It is truly incredible to see how a single event, whether or not the Red Sea opened, could have so fundamentally altered the course of human history in virtually every aspect imaginable. Our culture, our institutions, our values, our understanding of the world and ourselves, everything would be profoundly different. Stop and reflect for a moment on how your own life, your family, your work, your values, everything you are would be profoundly altered if those waters had not opened on that distant day. Share in the comments how you imagine your life would be different if the world had never been influenced by the story of the Red Sea and the religious traditions that emerged from it. When we think about the trajectory of miracles that permeate the biblical narrative, we realize that they are not isolated events, but are part of a divinely orchestrated chain. The miracle of the Red Sea acted as a gateway to a series of supernatural interventions that shaped Israel's journey. Each subsequent miracle was intrinsically connected to this first great act of liberation. After crossing the Red Sea, the Israelites experienced extraordinary divine manifestations in the desert. The pillar of cloud during the day and the pillar of fire at night supernaturally guided them through the hostile and unknown territory. Manna fell from the sky every morning, miraculously feeding a population of approximately 2 million people for 40 years. Water gushed from the rocks when Moses touched them with his staff, quenching the thirst of the entire crowd and their animals. Without the initial miracle of the Red Sea, none of these divine manifestations would have occurred, simply because the people would not have been there to witness them. The great theophany on Mount Sinai, when God came down in fire and thunder to deliver the 10 Commandments, would never have occurred. That defining moment, when the Creator of the universe established a formal alliance with a specific people, determining not only their religious laws, but their entire civil, moral, and social code, would be completely erased from history. The impressive tabernacle, built according to meticulous divine instructions, with its Ark of the Covenant, its candelabrum of pure gold, and the Holy of Holies where the divine presence visibly dwelt, would never have existed. The cloud of God's glory would never have descended to fill the sanctuary, manifesting divine approval of Israel's worship. The very logic of God's progressive revelation would be disrupted. The Lord was gradually revealing his character, his purposes, and his nature through sequential, miraculous events. This progressive revelation was like a book being written chapter by chapter, each miracle teaching something new about who God is and how he works. When Joshua led the people to cross the Jordan River, with the waters stopping again for them to pass on dry land, this miracle was deliberately designed to echo the crossing of the Red Sea. It was a divine confirmation of Joshua's leadership and a reminder that the same God who freed them from Egypt was now guiding them to future conquests. Without the first miracle, the second would lose its symbolic and theological meaning. The supernatural conquest of Jericho, with its walls collapsing to the sound of trumpets and shouts, would never have happened. The sun lingering in the sky during the Battle of Gibeon, giving Israel extra time to conquer its enemies, would only be an unrealized possibility in an alternate timeline. And perhaps most significantly, the promise of the Holy Land, a specific territory promised by God to Abraham and his descendants, would never have been fulfilled. The supernatural journey of a chosen people to a chosen place would have been aborted at the very beginning. The geographic stage where God planned to demonstrate his principles through a model nation would never have materialized. There is an important spiritual progression in the sequence of biblical miracles. Each supernatural event not only built on the previous ones, but also set the stage for the ones that followed. The Israelites needed to see God part the Red Sea to believe that he could rain manna from heaven. They needed to experience daily manna to trust that God could make water flow from a rock. Each supernatural manifestation built the faith necessary for the next stage of the journey. When you look at your own walk with God, can you identify how a miracle has opened doors to other blessings in your life? Can you see a divine sequence where one supernatural intervention created the foundation for the next? Type sequence in the comments if you have already realized that the miracles in your life are not random, but are part of a meticulously connected divine plan. Now let's turn to a fascinating aspect of this story, the tension between supernatural and natural explanations of the Red Sea event. Several scholars and scientists over the centuries have proposed natural explanations for what the Bible describes as a spectacular miracle. Some suggest that the Israelites crossed during an exceptionally low tide into a shallow, marshy area of the Sea of Reeds, an alternative translation for Red Sea, and that the Egyptian army was caught in a sudden returning tide. Others propose more complex theories involving strong winds combined with seismic effects. Oceanographic studies suggested that sustained winds of around 100 km/h blowing from a specific direction could have pushed water from shallow areas, creating a temporarily exposed path. Researchers at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT, and the University of California computationally modeled how winds could have created a phenomenon known as wind-water retreat, potentially exposing a path for hours. Some geologists theorize that a volcanic eruption in the region, possibly related to the Santorini eruption, could have caused a tsunami, whose initial retreat of waters could have created a temporary passage, followed by a devastating return of waters that would have swallowed the Egyptian army. Others point to documented phenomena of lake splitting by strong winds, as occasionally occurs in Lake Erie in the United States. However, even if there are theoretically possible natural mechanisms to explain the events described, does this really diminish the miraculous nature of the event? The true nature of the miracle may not lie in the suspension of physical laws, but in the perfect timing and divine orchestration of natural events to fulfill supernatural purposes. A God who created natural laws can certainly work through them in extraordinary ways. Timing is a crucial element here. Even if the mechanism were natural, the fact that it occurred at exactly the crucial moment when the Israelites were trapped lasted precisely as long as it took for millions of people to cross, and then reversed exactly when the last Israelite stepped onto dry land and the first Egyptian soldier entered the path, would be extraordinary divine coordination. This discussion raises important questions about our understanding of biblical miracles in general. Could other reported miracles, such as the rain of manna, the plagues of Egypt, or even Jesus' healings, also have underlying natural explanations? And if they do, does that diminish their theological significance? Many theologians argue that the presence of possible natural mechanisms does not reduce the miraculous character of the events, but simply demonstrates that God often works through the nature that he himself created. The true miracle is in the purpose, timing, and divine revelation that accompanies these events, not necessarily in the suspension of natural laws. On the other hand, if the Red Sea had not parted at all, neither by supernatural means nor by perfectly timed natural coincidence, the entire subsequent narrative would be different. If Moses had raised his staff and absolutely nothing had happened, not even a natural event that could be interpreted as divine intervention, the people's trust in God and Moses would have been irreparably shaken. This reflection leads us to a profound question about our own faith. Do we need spectacular and inexplicable events to believe in God? Or can we recognize the divine hand even in the apparently natural events of our lives? Perhaps the seas of red that open our paths today are often unexpected opportunities, extraordinary coincidences, or solutions that arise at the exact moment of our need. Reflect sincerely. Do you only recognize God acting when something completely inexplicable happens? Or can you see divine intervention, even in events that could have a natural explanation? Share in the comments how you notice miracles in your own life. The Red Sea episode represents much more than a simple historical event or an impressive miracle in Scripture. It offers us a profound model for our own journey of faith and reveals a universal truth. God often leads us into seemingly impossible situations for the specific purpose of demonstrating His extraordinary power in our lives. It is significant to note that it was God Himself who directed the Israelites to that critical position between the sea and the Egyptian army. He could easily have led the people along alternative routes that avoided the Red Sea altogether, as there were other routes to Canaan. However, God intentionally led them into a situation where only a miracle could save them. The purpose was clear: to establish from the beginning of their journey a fundamental principle. When human resources are exhausted, it is precisely at that moment that divine resources begin to operate fully. Moses' response at this critical moment provides us with an inspiring example of authentic faith. As the people panicked and even accused him of bringing them into the desert to die, Moses responded with one of the most powerful statements of faith recorded in the Bible. Do not be afraid. Stand firm and see the deliverance the Lord will give you today. The Lord will fight for you. Just be calm. This contrast between the people's reaction and that of Moses reveals two fundamentally different ways of responding to crises in our lives. The people reacted with fear, despair, and accusation. They focused exclusively on the immediate problem, the impassable sea ahead and the Egyptian army approaching from behind, and concluded that this was the end. Moses, on the other hand, looked beyond the visible circumstances and fixed his eyes on the promise and the promiser. He managed to access, through faith, a superior reality that transcended the apparent impossibility of the situation. We all face seas of red on our personal journey. It can be a devastating medical diagnosis that seems to offer no hope, a financial crisis that presents no viable mathematical solution, a relationship so deeply broken that reconciliation seems absolutely impossible, a professional situation with no visible way out. At some point, each of us finds ourselves trapped between metaphorical seas and armies that seem to seal our fate. What makes this narrative so relevant to our contemporary reality is that it establishes a spiritual pattern that remains valid through the ages. God often allows us to reach the absolute limit of our own resources before revealing His supernatural resources. He waits until all our strategies, alternative plans, and human solutions are completely exhausted, and then He manifests His power in ways that leave no doubt about the divine origin of the intervention. This pattern repeats itself consistently throughout Scripture. Abraham and Sarah had to wait until it was biologically impossible to father a child before Isaac's miracle occurred. Gideon was reduced to just 300 men to face an army of thousands. Daniel was thrown into the lion's den without any means of human defense. The three young Hebrews faced the fiery furnace with no possibility of escape. In each of these cases, God allowed the situation to become completely impossible by human standards before manifesting His supernatural power. Jesus continued this pattern during His earthly ministry. He waited until Lazarus had been dead for 4 days before resurrecting him, by which time any human hope had dissipated. Philip asked how to feed the hungry crowd, even though he already knew the miracle he would perform with the 5 loaves and 2 fish. He slept peacefully in the boat during the violent storm until the disciples were absolutely convinced that they would perish in the waters. Why does God work this way? Because when we are still in control of the situation, we naturally tend to trust our own abilities and resources. While we still glimpse some possibility of a human solution, we rarely surrender completely to divine dependence. The moments of absolute impossibility are precisely when we are most receptive and open to supernatural intervention in our lives. Perhaps you are right now facing your own personal Red Sea. Perhaps all exits seem blocked, all possible solutions have already been exhausted, and you feel the army of your problems approaching quickly. If this is the case, know that you are exactly in the position where God performs his greatest miracles. The moment we finally admit, "This is impossible for me," is the very moment God can say, "Now look at what is possible for me." The story of the Red Sea teaches us that our moments of greatest despair are often the prelude to our greatest liberations. The sea that today seems like your biggest obstacle may be exactly the stage that God chose for his greatest demonstration of power in your life. The question that remains is, will you, like the Israelites, be willing to take that first step of faith into the seemingly impassable waters, even when it seems completely irrational to human eyes? Take this step of faith today, even in the face of your own Red Sea that seems insurmountable, and be prepared to witness how God opens paths where there are no paths. After this fascinating journey of reflection, we have come to a stunning conclusion. The parting of the Red Sea was not just a spectacular miracle, but a defining moment that completely altered the course of human history. Imagine the devastating impact if this event had not happened. No nation of Israel, no Judaism as we know it, no Christianity, no Islam. The religious, moral, cultural, and social foundations of our modern civilization would have been completely different or possibly non-existent. The question we set out to investigate at the beginning of this video leads us to a deep existential reflection. We're not just talking about a distant historical event, but something that shapes who we are today. Your very existence, your values, your faith, your understanding of the world were all influenced, directly or indirectly, by that moment when the waters parted to create a path where there was none. The story of the Red Sea remains an eternal testimony that there are no impossible situations for God. When all seemed lost, when there was absolutely no humanly visible way out, God supernaturally intervened and changed not only the immediate destiny of the Israelites, but the spiritual future of all humanity. This event teaches us that the moments of greatest despair are often the prelude to the greatest miracles. When we find ourselves trapped between seemingly insoluble problems and imminent threats, we need to remember that we are in exactly the kind of situation where God most likes to manifest his extraordinary power. What makes this story so relevant to us today, thousands of years later, is that we all face our own Red Seas, impossible situations that require divine intervention. It could be a terminal illness, a devastated marriage, a dead-end financial situation, or an addiction that seems insurmountable. These are the places where God continues to open waters and create paths in the impossible. Think about how different your life would be if God had never intervened in your moments of crisis. How many times have you been in front of your own sea, with problems chasing you with no visible way out, and somehow a path opened up where there seemed to be none? Each of these moments connects your personal story to that ancient narrative in the desert sands. And now the question becomes personal for each of us. If God wanted to part a Red Sea in your own life today, would you have enough faith to walk toward the waters before you even saw them part? Would you be able to take that first step of obedience and trust when everything around you screams that it is impossible? Would Moses have had the courage to declare victory before even seeing any visible sign of divine intervention? Think for a moment. If you were there, on that beach, with the army approaching and the sea impassable before you, would you be one of those people screaming in panic and accusing Moses? Or would you be someone who remained calm, confident in the divine promise? Your answer reveals a lot about how you face your own seas of red today. What is the greatest miracle you have ever witnessed in your life, and how has it changed your faith? Share in the comments this transformative experience that opened an impossible sea in your path. When we contemplate the transformative power of the Red Sea in our lives, one truth becomes absolutely undeniable. You were led to this video by a divine purpose. There are no coincidences in the spiritual realm. The same God who divided the waters for the Israelites is now opening impossible paths in your life. What we have just discovered together is not just ancient history, It is a divine blueprint that continues to operate today with the same supernatural potency. Your private Red Sea has a glorious purpose: to reveal God's power so spectacularly that you will never question His ability again. Imagine the impact of this revelation on the lives of those around you who face their own impassable seas. When you share this video, you become the Moses in someone's life, pointing to the possibility of the impossible. Your simple gesture of clicking share right now literally transforms the perspective of someone who is about to give up. Every like you give to this video is a prophetic statement about the power of miracles in an unbelieving world. It is His public affirmation that the impossible happens when God intervenes. This isn't just a click. It's a leap of faith that expands the reach of this message to thousands of people who desperately need hope today. Your personal story of overcoming is living evidence of divine power. What you have already faced and overcome needs to be shared. You can't imagine how many people will be strengthened by reading your experience. Your comment becomes a spiritual memorial that inspires others to take the step of faith when all seems lost. Type in the comments now, "My sea opened when," and complete with your testimony. This community is a spiritual army that proclaims miracles in a generation that needs to see the supernatural manifested. By subscribing to the channel, you're not just following content, you're actively joining a movement that restores faith in miracles in the lives of millions. Your commitment strengthens this essential mission of revealing life-changing biblical truths to the world. Activate the bell and instantly receive each new revelation that God entrusts to us. This is a strategic decision for your spiritual growth. You will be the first to access knowledge that transforms perspectives and renews your faith in the impossible. The power revealed at the Red Sea is exactly the same power available to you today. This certainty changes everything. The God who opened the waters thousands of years ago is present in your situation right now with the same power, the same compassion, and the same commitment to your deliverance. In the next video, stunning revelations await you. Discover how another extraordinary biblical miracle holds the secret to unlocking supernatural blessings that many Christians never experience. This revelation is so impactful that it will change your understanding of the operation of divine power in your life.